Well, now I know not to turn my phone sideways when I'm making a video. So, like everything else, live and learn. This is the capital of Latvia, Riga. It was pretty nice. It was interesting to walk around for the day. Most of these pictures, or all of these pictures, are from the downtown area, the old town area. So enjoy. So I found this medieval theme tavern in downtown. It was just off the main square. So I went. I wasn't even sure what it was. So I went down into it and saw that it was a tavern. And the beer was a little bit pricey. It was €4 to have a beer, but I really liked it. I really found it really interesting, and it was really dark because you went from the light into the basement, and it was like a dungeon. And at first I couldn't barely see anything because it was so dark. My eyes hadn't adjusted yet, but after my eyes had adjusted, then I could see a lot better, and it was really an interesting ambiance. So I sat down and had a beer. Well, I found an inexpensive place just off the main square. It basically just had a soup with some dumplings, and it ended up costing me €5. So yeah, it was pretty good. Hi guys, well, I'm gonna try and I made up a little list of the stuff that I missed about my bike for that video I made there the other day. Here I'm in Latvia. End up a family gave. I was looking for a campground, and a family ended up letting me camp at their in their backyard. So it's been working out really good. They're excellent. There, you can see here they actually ran an extension cord. So I've got power, so I can run my laptop and work on these videos and that here. I've been taking a shower in the house, and yeah, it's been really good. I had lunch with them today and just shoot the breeze for about an hour or so. But yeah, it's been pretty good. So anyways, here's my bike again. A couple of things that, well, actually there's quite a few things that I had missed, but I'll go over them a little bit here. I had also, well, actually these extensions for the mirrors, and the mirrors themselves are an aftermarket, and they work really well. I get a really good view at the back, which is really important. Because a lot of mirrors on bikes and that, they all you see is your elbows. So if it doesn't matter what kind of bike you buy or whatever, if you get a bike where you look and you have to like crank your head around to really to see anything in that you can't just take a glance and see what's behind you or what's around you, then you should get these extensions. And the mirrors themselves, they're a little bit convex, so you get a little bit more of a field of view. So yeah, I would suggest that for anybody. Also, I had put this ram mount on here, and well, it's kind of a double-edged sword. The reason why I had my my last wipeout there with my bike, here's some of the cracked and some of the rash and that, and it could have been really serious, but I got lucky and I didn't, not too much happened to me physically. I was kind of fooling around with it there, and yeah, so it's good to have, because then you can, I run my GPS. So I use my phone's GPS all the time. I don't have a GPS, like satellite GPS. I just find that using the phone works good, and the GPS on the phone is a lot more friendly user, I found, than most of the other GPSs that I've worked with. And it's cheap, because I already have the data, and with the phone, with Google, I can download, and I don't even need data. I can download sections of the map and just go off of what I've downloaded. So it's actually pretty convenient. Also, I had mentioned a tank bag there last time, but I didn't mention that GV has this clip-on system for the tank, so that the tank bag actually sits up off the tank. Like, my tank's a little bit banged up and this and that, so I don't really care about that. Again, that came with the bike when I bought it. Same with the mirrors and extensions. But I really, if I were to do this again, I would use the same kind of mount, because it's very convenient. You just have, there's a little lever that you pull on to remove the tank bag. If you know how to take it off, it's really easy, but if you don't know how to take it off, then it is a little bit of a pain in the ass. So it's really not that easy for a layman to try and steal it. It is quite cumbersome if you don't know exactly what you're doing. So it's worked out pretty good. Oh, I didn't even have this on my list, but I had when I bought the bike here, there's the hand warmers. Well, the hand warmers are nice, especially if you're like at home. Not really so much for traveling, but when you're at home, or even when you're traveling, if you go out and you get back a little bit late at night and it cools down at night, depending on the season, and your hands start to get cold, you don't have your gloves with you or whatever, you put those on and it makes it tolerable. You know, it actually works out pretty good. I almost never use it when I'm traveling, because as I mentioned before, I've got heated liners for my gloves, and so that's a lot more effective, a lot more how I can say, efficient for the electrical system. It doesn't use as much as much power, and it puts more into the actual glove, where these hand warmers, they have to warm up the grips, and then they just warm up the palms of your hands, so they don't really warm up the let's call it the top of your hands or the middle of your fingers or anything. So they're okay, but the liners I find are a lot better. But since it was already on the bike, I just left it on the bike, and I have used them in the past a few times. It has come in handy. The skid plate, obviously you saw that I had a skid plate on here, and this skid plate is a steel skid plate. Now, it's quite heavy, and I actually thought about maybe going to aluminum and that, and I kind of played with the idea of just spending the money and buying aluminum, because that is quite this steel plate is quite heavy. But with all the weight that I'm running, and I've been on some dirt roads, some rough roads and what have you, and I have hit it pretty hard. I suspect that if I was running with an aluminum skid plate, that I might have broken it or cracked it by now. So, and this one I've had no issues with. So for me, I think it's better to run with the steel skid plate. And again, it came with the bike, so it didn't cost me anything. It was already on the bike when I bought it. So for me, I think it's better for this metal, but I think for most other people, probably the aluminum would be okay. It's going to be lighter, which is going to help you, you know, for your fuel economy and everything else. But yeah, that's something I thought I'd mention. Anyways, when I had my accident, I had broken the signal lights, so I had replaced them with these here LED lights, and they actually work really good. I had to adapt it a little bit, and yeah, they were dirt cheap. I paid for a whole setup, like four lights, and then I had some other couple of LED lights to put as a license plate light. I never use them. I have them with me, but they cost like $10. I got it from China, and it took like 2 months to get them, but they've been working really well. I actually had to buy another module, because when you go to LED lights, the relay for your signal light won't work because it's not drawing enough power. So I actually had to, at the time when I ordered the LED lights, signal lights, I also ordered that relay, and it just unplug and plug in kind of thing, and I've had no issues with it. I have the original with me just in case, and yeah, so everything's worked out pretty good with it. I'm actually very happy. They're actually pretty bright. They're small, and you think, oh, that's not going to throw that much, but they're actually very bright. And again, going with LED lights, then it's going to be taking less power. And since I have a lot of extra electrical stuff on the bike, then it's, you know, if I can save on one side, I have more on the other side. So that's one of the reasons also I went to LED headlights. Now they're super bright. They're really bright. Sometimes it irritates the other drivers and that, but too bad for them. At least they see me. They can see me and be irritated, or not be irritated and maybe not see me. So I'd rather them see me and be irritated a little bit. But I had bought one from Amazon, and I think it cost me like $20. I'm really happy with that one. And then I bought one from China, and I think it cost me like $10, and it works okay. But if I had to do it over again, I would have bought the other one for $20 from Amazon. It just seemed to work a lot better. It's a little bit brighter, and the color of it, the tinting of it's a little bit different. But I had bought the two from China, and I just put one in here, and then I have the other one with me in case one of these blow out. So that, but they both work. They work pretty good. I'm satisfied with both. The trunk, and I know I mentioned the trunk the other day, and I know a lot of guys that a lot of times on the internet you hear about guys, they're talking about trunks. They don't believe you shouldn't run with a trunk and this and that. You know, I run with very little in the trunk. It's more for stuff that, as I mentioned before, to be accessible, like rain gear and stuff like that. That's going to be in there. Nothing that's heavy. And I also like to leave it only half full, so that if I am walking around in town, I can take off my jacket and put it in there. So I like to have at least enough room in here to put my jacket. The other day I actually mentioned also the inverter, and I thought I'd just show you the inverter that I had bought. So this is the inverter right here. So as you can see, it's pretty small, but it's rated almost double what the draw is on my laptop, and that's basically the only thing I use it for is charging my laptop. So yeah, I thought I'd just show you so you have an idea what to look for or what have you. And it was cheap. I forget how much I paid for it, but I'm pretty sure I paid less than $20 for it. And it's worked really well. I used it in Canada for about a year or so, and then on this trip. So I'm hoping that it'll last the whole trip. If not, then I'll just go to a local electronics store and pick up something else. The other day I also mentioned the sprockets and the advantages of having a larger sprocket at the front for the chain. I did kind of mention there are some disadvantages. The one really disadvantage is that when you're taking off, when you're leaving from like a standstill from a red light or whatever, you have to ride the clutch a little bit more to get it going. It also is problematic if you get into really tight, if you start going off-road where you're just chugging along on that, then it can be really, it can be an issue. I've been able to get away with it so far, but I do realize that I do have I have an extra chain and sprockets for both front and back, but I also have an extra sprocket for the front that is the original size, so it's one less tooth, so it's going to be a little bit easier for off-road riding and that. And talking about the off-road riding, I have my extra tires that I had bought. I had bought these in Canada and that, so I took them with me. If I had to do it over again, I probably wouldn't have brought the tires with me because I don't need them at this moment in time. I could have saved myself a lot of weight, but you know, hindsight's 20/20, not a big deal. But I got these two tires. Now here's this is the front tire here. Obviously this is the back tire, and they're actually two different makes and two different two different models and that. I had a German take a look at my tires, and he was, oh, well, no, these don't match. You can't run like that. Oh, and I just looked at him and I was like, yeah, you can, and it's not an issue. The reason why I went to more of a road tire for the front is that if I have to match it up with an actual road tire, they're going to work better together, and it'll work good enough with the back tire that if I get into some really sandy or muddy conditions, that it'll work a hell of a lot better than a street tire, but obviously not as good as a more of a mud tire or sand tire. But it's going to be a good excuse me, a good compromise. I've ran with different tires all the time. Is it ideal? No. You know, in a perfect world, you wouldn't do that. At home, generally speaking, I wouldn't do that. But when I'm traveling around, you know, there's a lot of things that you do when you're traveling around that maybe you wouldn't do at home. And this is one of the things. It's more practical, really, for me anyways. And I went up the Tuk-Tuk, and I actually had a tire like this on the back, but I had like a 1090 in the front, and it didn't really matter because the front, all I did was I put it in the rut so that it wouldn't move around, and then at the back all I did was I just was idling, and it was just going through the mud like a tractor, and I didn't have any issue. You know, if I was in a race and this and that, then that would be different, but I'm not in a race, so I can just adapt my driving, and it hasn't been an issue. But yeah, you get like the Germans or whatever, and they'll just lose their minds when they see this kind of thing. With these tires, when I put those tires on, what I'll do with the chain is I'm going to put the smaller sprocket on the front. Hopefully by that time the chain will need to be done, so I can do everything at the same time. So I'll run with a smaller sprocket in the front, so my gearing will be higher or lower, however you want to say it, and yeah, they'll match up a little bit better. The other video also, I mentioned that I had upgraded the stator. Well, I have an extra stator. Well, what happened was that for my last trip, I had upgraded the stator, and it worked good, no problem. But when I had gone back to Canada, one day when I went to go for a ride on a Friday, the bike wouldn't start. So I fooled around with it, and I ended up finding out that it had this bike actually has self-diagnostics, and you just have to know how to wire it up to activate that self-diagnostics. You can find out on the internet how to do it. It's not very hard, really. So I'll leave that if you're really interested. Just look it up, and there's all kinds of videos on it. Anyways, that stator, when it wouldn't start, when I did the self-diagnostics, what it was a crank sensor, and the crank sensor was a part of the stator harness, the new stator harness that I had put in. So I was pretty disappointed that the stator was good, but then that sensor to buy it from Suzuki, they wanted like 160 to depending which dealer I was talking to, it was like 160 to about $350. So I end up just putting back in the original stator. And I said, you know what, I'll just put in back the original stator. And the spare stator that I have, the stator itself is upgraded, so it has a higher output, but I didn't want to put it in because I didn't want to run into any other issues like I had with the other one. So but I do have it in case something happens with this stator or this crank sensor. I have a spare. And I also took the the bike came with this guard for the radiator. I was kind of iffy on it there at the start because I thought maybe it would block too much airflow, but the bike seems to run good with it. No issues. The fan doesn't come on too often, so and it seems to do the job. So it's going to protect from any rocks happening to hit it and damage the rad. The bike also, when I bought it, came with the guards. They call it the engine guards, the crash guards, whatever you want to call them here. And if you're traveling for an extended period of time, having these extra guards, because at a bare minimum you're just going to fall over, if not slide a little bit. So these will help to protect you and protect the bike and keep you rolling. You know, they might get scratched up, they might get banged up, they might even get bent, but it's better that to take the punishment than the bike. It also has this little guard here that came with the bike too. I don't know how much it really helps, but I left it on there because it came with the bike. At the front here, it also had a fork brace. It came with fork brace, and I'd say most bikes, it's not a bad idea to have that fork brace because it stiffens up the front end, and especially if you're running kind of heavy or hard, then it really helps in your handling. So it's worth $100-150 to get. The footrests also have there's extensions that came, like again, came with the bike. It drops the foot about your footrest about an inch or so. So if you have longer legs than that, it makes it more comfortable. So it's something that I saw that you know, that I think it's helps me a little bit, and I thought I'd mention it to you. That helps with your position in that. So anything to make it more comfortable for you to ride is better. One of the last things I want to talk about really is the center stand here. You know, not everybody is a fan of the center stand and that. I think especially for a person who's touring, who's traveling a lot, it's basically a necessity. Because if you have to work on your tires, if you're type of person who when he travels, if he breaks down, he just gets it towed or carried or picked up or whatever and brought to a shop and get it fixed. Well, if you're that kind of person, then you don't need a center stand. It's true. But if you're the kind of person that if something happens with your bike, or with your bike, then you're gonna basically try and fix it as much as possible by yourself. And if you're that kind of person, then you basically need a center stand. And so I'm a real advocate of that center stand, because if you got to work on your tires or the front end or the back end, work on your brakes, anything, it just makes everything a lot easier. I have to say that in the last 30 years after my trip to Latin America, I learned quite a bit about the bikes, and I have yet to have to bring my bike to a shop to get it fixed. And I've had problems with ABS. I've had, like I said, the no start. But there's so much information out there with the internet and that as a general rule, you should be able to figure it out yourself. And it's a good idea that if you're not very mechanically inclined, well, you know what, try it out anyways. Do the best you can, because there's not always going to be somebody there to help you out. You know, it's great when people help you out, and whenever, just like when I'm staying here, it's great that people that offered me a place to stay. That's excellent, but I don't depend on that. when it happens, that's great, and I accept it, and it's really good. It makes life a lot easier for sure. But I'm always I stress so much that you really need to be able to do it, basically do it yourself, you know, and hope that maybe somebody will help you out. Great, but don't depend on it. Don't depend when you're on a journey like this. Don't depend on other people helping you. You know, depend on yourself. So take care of yourself, take care of your equipment. Yeah, so here's the wiring that I did here. It might look a little bit messy, and I guess it is a little bit, but I put in this fuse box here, which helped to clean it up quite a bit. And the way that I had wired it up, I've got some wires, a couple of wires running off the same fuse. And one thing that I didn't do that I would probably suggest that somebody, if they're to do something like this, especially when it gets this detailed in the wiring, is to actually make yourself a little bit of a wiring diagram. Because I be honest with you, sometimes I've gone into work in here and I was like, oh yeah, what does this do? And I'd had to figure out what I had done, and it just takes a little bit of extra time, but it's not that big of a deal. But in the future, I think I'll make myself a little wiring diagram, and or also mark my my fuses. I was just thinking, as I was talking to you here, I was just thinking that I could just mark the fuses so that if I have problem with the fog lights or any of the systems, it would help me in the troubleshooting. Go, oh, okay, yeah, that's this fuse or that fuse. So anyways, it's always, I'm always learning. So that's those are the mods I did to the bike, and the mods that were already done to the bike. It's there's quite a bit, and you know what, to be honest with you, I probably forgot a couple of things too, but that's a vast majority of the mods that I have done with this bike. So there you go, guys. You have a good day. Enjoy. You know, with all this, as I mentioned before, with all this stuff, you know, try to do it yourself. You know, if you make a mistake, it's going to cost you a little bit of money, but especially if you can practice this stuff, do the stuff at home, so that when you go traveling, you've got, you know, you've got an idea on how everything works. You're not totally blind. And that's one of the reasons why I like to work on my bike too, is that if I don't know about something, then I'm going to learn about it. So you know, to make that a part of your adventure too, is that you're learning as you go along. Anyways, these guys, everybody has a good day, and we'll talk to you again. Bye bye.